Home. Home. What is a home? There are so many words that could describe what we associate with home. Some of us, it's about the growing up, the times that shaped us, the house that we lived in, the emotional sound bites, the memories, the sorrow, the experiences of home. So this presentation I've dedicated to taking you home, but taking you home in every way. Not only taking you home to your roots, taking you home to your origins, but taking you home to something internal, a place inside you that grounds you, an attention that you can bring from within you to whatever situation that arises, a sense of base camp, a home base where you can come back to it and to rely on this place. Hiraeth, it's a Welsh word, and it's a difficult word to describe because it expresses so much about home. It's a word that's used to describe homesickness or yearning or longing. But there is more depth in Hiraeth than in any of those words on their own. It seems to be a multi-layered word which includes a different variety of homesickness than what is generally referred to. And this kind of homesickness is like a combination of the longing and the nostalgia and the yearning for a home that you cannot return to, a home that no longer exists and maybe never was. It can also include grief or sadness or who or what you have lost, losses which make your home not the same as the one that you remember. I like to think of Hiraeth as a longing to be where your spirit lives. And I think this description makes some sense out of the combination of words that I describe in this feeling. The place where your spirit feels most at home may be a physical location that you can return to at any time. You have that special place. When I think of the word genius, it reminds me that throughout our lives, we get kind of de-geniused. We get sidetracked by external and internal forces. Challenges blow us off of our roots, blow us off of our placeholders, our sense of ground. When things get tough, we get stressed, we become fragile. And so where do we go for refuge? Where do we go to find that place? Do we go to the old home, the place that we were, the physical place? We must ask ourselves, what is our home? What house are we living in? So when we go to this place, the genius loci, the place of the genius, the magic in us, the genie in us, is sort of relocated. It's not that we're attached to a place, but something out of the regular time of the past, time of the future, time to think, something outside of those places helps us revisit and regenerate and reclaim something that we left behind. And so my intention in this talk is to provide some poems and reflections and stories on behalf of conveying a revival, an emerging revival. To share these stories is somewhat like the ancestors would say, it's the oldest form of healing. And maybe as you hear me say these things, as I talk these out and share experiences with you and go deep, we're going to take a deep dive into this topic of coming home. Maybe it'll help you access or reclaim something that has been missing. Maybe it's a joy, maybe it's a contentment, maybe it's looking at things again in a different way, a sense of renewal. Maybe it's the re-entry into your imagination where you can wonder again and get outside of your own thought about the way things you think they are versus what you really want. Sometimes coming home is the home of the heart. And coming home is what passes the cynicism into a place where we're home to our curiosity, but also our compassion and our ability to see through the difficulties and be able to arrive, to be present, to stay with whatever it is. I don't think we can do that with just our intellect. I think our equipment is that we awaken our hearts to be able to hold space, to put space around things that come and go like the wind. We all have challenges. We all have obstacles. Life is not without them. But we have to find these places to return to a place of beauty, return to a place, the landscape of our heart, maybe the landscape of our soul. Rachel Remen, the medical doctor who has talked so much about what animates us, what reanimates us. I understand that this woman sits with cancer patients that are on the last parts of their lives. I just admire that kind of resilience of someone that can sit with them and be present. And one of her claims is that by doing so, it isn't so much what she's doing to them, it's rather just showing up and being with them just as they are. There's something about this that is so legitimizing. And I wonder, what kind of heart does she cultivate to be able to offer those resources to people that are so simple and yet so overlooked? And yet sometimes it's just that sense of acceptance, of belonging with unconditional acceptance that's so transformative. And she reminds doctors of that Hippocratic oath to serve the wholeness of others. But she talks about a triad. She talks about meaning being one side of the triangle, which we might say is the language of the soul. And service is the other, which is the work of the soul. But then she talks about the mystery, which is this place of potential, this place of pure possibilities. A place from which things emerge. That place. It's not an easy place to point at, because can you identify that it's within you? Probably not. Maybe it's something that surrounds you, like a matrix, a womb. Perhaps. Throughout my coaching career, I have experienced entrepreneurs and leaders encountering this place of potential. When we go deeply into current reality and we talk about the current situations that they're in, as we sort of unpeel and we peel back the banana, as we unfold the moments and we look deeper and we stay a little bit longer, isn't it amazing the context that life offers you, that you can sort of connect the dots, sometimes by looking behind, sometimes making meaning out of things that occur, and we can serve the process of becoming a human being, of learning how to be a human being. That is the first step to being a leader. And so in doing so, we have to sort of come home to ourselves. There's a quality of homecoming in that we strip away the accumulations, that less becomes more, and there's addition by subtraction, and that this story of making things less chaotic has very much to do with something that needs to be born. And I've sensed it throughout my career. It's sort of an invisible curriculum. It's an implicit curriculum that sits at the root of all the coaching work that I do. And it's sort of hidden. It's sitting in the room. And it's sort of this whisper in my heart to come from a place of truth and honesty. And I encounter it all week long, every day, just like social meditation in the coaching work. I'll do 45, sometimes 50 sessions in 1 week. And despite my mental exhaustion, what is lit up is everything else, is just the process of showing up from some place that flows, some animation or energy that is moved by the other individual, and the patterns of interaction that we're having bring me home in some way and change me or bring me back to the honesty that I am. I don't know how that happens. It's a phenomena that I have been fascinated with throughout my career. It's like submitting some sort of will that I have for something else, surrendering into some other feeling that wants something of me. It's hard to describe this outer force, this outer realm that seems to be all-encompassing, like a choral voice that wants to break things up or pull things together. Something's living there, something active, and something that's ready to happen. And it's up to me, up to you, to turn on the radio tower and to tune in with unblocked reception to receive that which is wanting to desire itself. There's movement that's there. It's a place where spirit feels. It feels most home. It feels ready, willing, able. It is a part of us to be changed, to be moved, to be inspired, to be challenged, to be touched. So we're going to go through a number of stories and poems to go into this topic, and I'm going to do my best as a journey here to go into it with you. I'm not claiming to be an expert in what I'm talking about. I just want to share with you the originality of my experience and let you take it from there. Just like offering you a piece of music, you make the song your own. And so this isn't about being an expert teaching you how. This is about sharing some stories and experiences to deepen your attention and your awareness and maybe look in a different way at things, a way that shifts the interior condition of you from which you attend to the world, and that from that place you act in accordance with something different. There's something metamorphic, transformative about a great story or a poem, something that lives there that somehow just feels right at the right time and place, that connects with you, something deep that's only yours, that's intimate, that is intimacy happening there, as if something is opening you up, and you're ready for a more courageous road. You're ready for sort of that confession, that quality of vulnerability to offer yourself to the world in a way that maybe you haven't before. You didn't even know how, but yet you know that something deeply, something primordial is beginning in you that needs to bring you to a place of home. So let's begin. Angeles Arrien is a sage, a woman who passed away a few years ago, anthropologist, wrote a great book called The Fourfold Way, and also The Second Half of Life. And she talks about mystery like this. She says, I trust mystery. I trust what comes in silence and what comes in nature where there's no diversion. I think the lack of stimulation allows us to hear and experience a deeper river that's constant, still, vibrant, and real. And the process of deep listening with attention and intention catalyzes and mobilizes exactly what's needed at that time. As if everything the future needs is given to you in this moment, as if everything that you've just experienced has prepared you for this moment, and it's not explainable. And it doesn't need to be explainable. And that's where faith comes in, is that you trust that possibility without prediction, because prediction is originating from fear. Fear, of course, gives rise to control, needing to avoid a certain problem or something in the past. And so therefore, it's not needed. It's not needed for you to duck something in the past to avoid it from happening. It's not needed. And so the point is, can you renew that place from which you trust what the mystery brings? Because the mystery brings the gift of hope. And hope is not a prognostication. It's not a prediction. It's knowing that what you're doing is right, that it's right by the fact that what you're doing is true to yourself. And so it begins with a fundamental choice. Now, we often think of mystery as we just have to let things go and let things come. We're going to go with the flow and we're going to let everything happen. That's not the relationship with mystery that I've experienced. Mystery kind of punches through in a way. It lives in your reality the more that you set an intention from a place of love. What do I mean by that? Generative care for something you want to create. It's an orientation of the spirit. It's something that comes from a place that you just know, in the deepest knowing, in the primary knowing, that it matters. And that creating it is for its own sake. And you can decide to create or not create. That's the question. But in that you find mystery. Why? Because you don't know how to create it. You're going to need to bump into some accidents. You're going to find your way along the way. So you start in the labyrinth. And you have an idea. You care deeply about this idea and you hold steady to it. And the idea is the idea. It matters to you. Therefore you create it. It's not terribly big. It doesn't need to be grandiose. But rather the mystery pops up. It reveals itself by realizing how much you don't know. And what you're struck with is profound humility in combination with this fierce intention of something in your heart that is wild, that wants to be created. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe your brain says, don't do it. You might get hurt. Don't do it. People might mock you, laugh at you. But something in you just says, I can't not do it. I have to do it. I need to do it. I hunger to do it. I must do it. It's not even a decision to make, really, when you know that your heart's desire is something that you know is needed of you. It stands in service of you. It's something that must exist. It's more of an obsession, but not an obsession in the sense that you're so all in that you neglect everything else in your life. It's just the orientation is such that you love it so much that you choose to make it exist. And that is, in essence, where the mystery might just find you. But coming home means to render yourself ready for another road, the learner, not the performer, but the one who just forgets what he or she knows. In order for this learning or this process of deliverance, of this revelation, this inheritance of that which you care about creating, takes hold, and you learn by doing it. That's right. You just start. See, the places from which you start are just simply an intention. You can't guarantee anything, but you just start creating it. So as you think about this, think about the things that you've been saying no to that maybe you could say yes. Something you've been yearning, longing, a place from within you, in your heart that you love generatively, and then you begin to create it. Start right now. Just think about that. It all begins here. It all begins with knowing nothing lasts forever. So you might as well start packing now. In the meantime, practice being alive. There will be a party where you'll feel like nobody's paying you attention, and there will be a party where attention's all you've got. What you need to do is to remember to talk to yourself between these parties. And again, there will be a day, maybe a decade, where you won't fit in with your body. Even though you're in the only body you're in, you need to control your habit of forgetting to breathe. Remember when you were younger and you practiced kissing on your arm. You were on to something then. Sometimes harm knows its own healing, and comfort knows its own intelligence. Kindness, too. It needs no reason. There is a you telling you another story of you. Listen to him. Where do you feel? Anxiety in your body? The chest? The fist? The dream before waking? The head that feels like it's at the top of the swing? Or the clutch of gut, like falling and falling and falling and falling? It knows something. You're dying. Try to stay alive. For now, touch yourself. I'm serious. Touch yourself. Take your hand. Place your hand someplace upon your body. And listen. Listen to the community of madness that you are. You are such an interesting conversation. You belong here. It all begins here. It begins here with knowing how to learn. And how do you position yourself to learn? You open yourself up again with an open mind. You suspend your judgment. You let go of the old stories, the stories that you conserve about you, the concepts that you have about you. You just rid yourself of them. You let go of your expectations. Those are premeditated disappointments. You let go of your ideals, the standards that you're supposed to compare yourself to. So just picture for a moment that inner sketch of the you with these things missing. Not that they're reprogrammed or that they're missing because you wrote yourself a love note or because you regained your love again for you. No, it's really about coming by yourself honestly. It's about being fluent in teaching yourself the truth. You feel how you feel. Your feelings are separate from you, and that's why you can relate with them. I often think that those that are so afraid to share their feelings, the stoic ones, are really the most inadequate or insecure with their feelings because they've hid them and buried them. And rather than having a fundamental fluency with themselves and coming by themselves honestly, they have buried it. To be able to save face, to be able to achieve some sense of stability, but it's all folly. Because without that kind of honesty, we have no objectivity of ourselves. And by telling ourselves the truth of what we feel and what we are, we have a baseline. We have a foundation of the truth to be able to move from point to point. So be true to you. Make that decision. I truly want to be true to myself. Fundamental choice. It's a big choice. It means that you're not going to live in the editorial of yourself, the conjecture, the stories, the assumptions, the database. You live outside of it. So one might ask, well, how do you regulate that? You regulate that with awareness. That's right, because you have the equipment. You have a mind and you have a brain. And when your brain is quiet, it is regulated by the mind, because the processes that are in the brain are just thought. They're not thinking, they're thought. And the thought often goes unchecked. So you see and then you believe, and then you automatically habituate that judgment, and then boom, you acted on poorly acquired information. You didn't know what was really going on. And you find out later that you trusted a belief or a thought or an assumption that wasn't true, but you made sense of it. You thought it was simple. It should be this way, but then it turns out that way. And when you get surprised, all of a sudden, the expectations weren't met, your frustration goes up, and then you're in this reactive state. And that's where suffering comes from. I'm not trying to alleviate your suffering. Suffering is suffering. We have suffering. We go through these things. What I'm saying is that there's resilience. There's something quite interesting about establishing a way of rooting yourself, of planting yourself in such a way where your disposition is able to bear witness to and soften your edge to whatever is truly going on. You can be the eye in the storm that stands in the middle of it and bears witness to what it is without causing it to move you away or cause you to hide or cause you to aggress, but rather take that holding moment. Hold it as just a moment, because you know it's coming and going. It's like the wind, and you can let it blow through you. Like a flute. You have air in you to blow through. Like you're porous. You allow that to move through. But that takes cultivation. I mean, that requires quieting yourself down, letting go of trusting every thought, being aware of your thought, as well as presenting yourself the facts. Right? Coming home to the originality of your experience starts with cultivating a mindfulness about what you are doing. Is mindfulness something you have to go and meditate about? No. It's being aware of how you are aware. It's seeing your own seeing. It's knowing your automatic mind stuff. You know you're a rascal. You know you have stuff. I call it sneaking up on you. You just have to sneak up on you a little bit more and understand how you're connected to the larger patterns that play out in your life, and that those thoughts and those assumptions and things do have direct influence on things that play out. They do. They are structural. They have movement. They influence your behavior. So if you're not aware of being aware, if you're not aware of what the content is of your mind, if your beliefs go on unchecked, well, then a lot of the things you see are just impressions. They're not reality. And that isn't going to work because there's no learning in it. And when there's no learning, you're not home. You haven't come home to being able to learn and acquire any new information. You get old. You just keep looking at the same thing and reconfirming the same things that you already know. And that's why time passes so quickly, is that as we get older, we often say, why is it happening so quickly? It's because we have all this experience and we keep looking for the same things again and confirming them rather than seeing the disconfirming reality. And that's about positioning ourselves. It all begins here. I'd like to share a piece with you called You Learn by Luis Borges. After a while, you learn the subtle difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul. And you learn that love doesn't mean leaning, and company doesn't mean security. And you begin to learn that kisses aren't contracts, and presents aren't promises. And you begin to accept your defeats with your head up and your eyes open, with the grace of a woman, not the grief of a child. And you learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans. and futures have a way of falling down in mid-flight. After a while, you learn that even sunshine burns if you get too much. So you plant your garden and decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. And you learn that you really can endure, that you really are strong, and you really do have worth. And you learn, and you learn, and you learn, and with every goodbye, you learn. It reminds me of losing my best friend in 2017. With every goodbye, you learn. With his goodbye, I learned that I could endure a goodbye. There's no way of knowing how to work through death. You don't have a manual. There's no book that says, here's how we do it. You learn by doing it. You witness and you bear the truth of someone being lost in your life, and then you realize that as you go through the process, you learned it, it was necessary, and that you had whatever was needed to do it. The knowing and the doing were the same. It's like putting a baby in water or a dog in the ocean. You swim. There's no other way back. You come home to the fact that you have this ability to stay in the negative conditions without being negative. It's just knowing how to pay attention. You show up. You show up. And as you show up, you're present. You choose to be. You choose to have it for whatever it is, in whatever form it's in, you choose to stay. It's like this. I can stay with what's happening. And the beauty, the gift, is that we have this in us. We obviously do, because how many thousands of leaders have I found know so much more than they can ever say? You know more than you can ever say. You don't know what you know until you know. And so you're forever broken in that. There is no way to really predict anything. We can intend it. We can orient ourselves to the creative. We can orient our spirits to the creative. And we can learn the mechanics as we go. The way through how is yes. This is it. Orison. Orison. It means blessing. It means to pray to a deity, to pray to the divine. This year, one of the most powerful lessons that came upon me was when a client and I were describing an experience of driving across the United States, through the Great Plains and through the Great Basin, and then over Highway 50, from Colorado back to Northern California. He described to me his experience of the mountains. He shared photos with me about his excursion. And as I listened, I found myself experiencing something different. We came to a point where he was showing me a place that he had reached on a mountain, looking across. There was a great vista of a snow peak around Shasta. And I began to ask all these questions. And suddenly it went silent, and he said, you know, it's great to ask these questions and try to make sense of it all. But maybe it's just about letting the mountain explain itself. It became clear to me that my self and my wanting to learn it and my wanting to know and my understanding at that point was just all mine. But what was being shared was the mountain, and what I could not ever really understand was the quality of his experience. And in that moment, I realized there's a certain respect, a certain reverence for the experience that other people have. In business, you can't manage someone's experience. But isn't it a gift to hear their experience of you as a leader, their experience of a situation? And when we are transparent about how we experience something and we share it with others, there's a legitimacy, there's a respect where everything that's being said is said in the sense that it is just the way that it was to be experienced and untouched. And when I heard about the mountain being able to explain itself, it brought me to see that this is truly how to see beauty. How to see the miraculous in the ordinary is to allow the ordinary to be there in the originality of its own, in taking its own place in the whole system. So I went back to the photo and I looked at the mountain and I looked at the references to other mountains around it, and everything that sort of played into the photo had made this composition of what he had witnessed. And what was witnessed was the mountain itself. And as I looked at it longer and longer, it just seemed to come in a different way of perceiving it without adding anything to it. It was so amazing just to sit and witness just what it is, and to be exactly where the experience is, and to not try to make it my own, but rather let it be the way that it needs to explain itself. And I find that's very much how poetry is written when I experience it, is that you smell something or something hits your senses, you see it, and therefore it is brought into a whisper, a language, and that language explains itself in the way that you hollow yourself out. You surrender to its presence, and it moves into words, and the words are asking to be trusted. And you don't know yet what it all means. You don't know what it's saying until it says what it says for itself, for the sake of itself in its own way. And it animates you to write it. It connects with something you're aware of, and you move with it. And I've been asking all year long, where do creations come from? Do they come from what we imagine? Do creations come from sudden epiphanies? Maybe all the above. But this matchstick, this instance of a creative seed, of something that is emerging, seemed to be brought forth by the observation of letting the mountain explain itself, letting the thing be as just a thing, and that itself is phenomenal. It is metamorphic. It's transformative in allowing it to be just there. It's in its own way, in its own beauty, in its own place to take. And so I'd like to emphasize this with a great poem by Ellen Bass called The Thing Is. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it. And everything that you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat, thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you down like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face. Between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you, I will love you again. To let things be without messing with them, to let the mountain explain itself with a soft edge to meet it, that's what I can contribute. And that's what came in, was to signal that moment where I could access that capability, was to just be fluent and teach myself what the mountain needs to say. Not what I add to it, not what I need it to say, not my bias, not how I explain it to myself in the way that I know, but to be separate from what I know and allow it to explain itself, to be factual, to be in its own truth. And that itself has a generative order to it, because it establishes a foundation of the truth from which we see. We learn to see. And to do that, we must move from what we already know into what we see, and then meet it just as it is, because we can. And that's what showing up to me is about, is just to be present and choose to be present. It's so simple, it's hard, but it's a choice. And the thing is, it's just a thing as a thing because of other things that are there, and even your own perception has a generative quality to it. So to see things as they are is quite something, because what you see is what you get. The Snowman by Wallace Stevens. In this one, he describes one must have a mind of winter. We must think like a snowman. He says one must have a mind of winter to regard the frost and the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow, and have been cold a long time, to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land, full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens to the snow, and nothing himself beholds, nothing that is not there, and nothing that is. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost and the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow, and have been cold a long time, to behold the juniper shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land, full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself beholds, nothing is not there, and nothing that is. Stevens states that the observer of nature during the winter needs to have this cold and detached approach. And so it helps us see that there are internal ways that we can establish a way of seeing that is outside how we're affected by it all. It doesn't mean that we're not connected to our humanness, but it's among those things. It's among the emotional state. See, he describes the snowman of nothing himself, suggests a literal snowman, but this is surely the metaphor. It's saying that the listener and the observer must be a man of snow. He must possess the qualities of snow, but also ego-free. Ego-free. Because what's different than ego-free? Well, it brings me to say eco, which is house. To see the whole. And this gets into a bit of a paradox, because Stevens is telling us to project our human qualities and see them, and yet not become preoccupied with them. And so we can't do that when we're in a non-human world of the wind and the snow and nature. He's telling us to let the mountain explain itself. He's telling us to be more like the snow. Cool and objective, rather than seeking to make the winter more like us. Transform it into misery, sadness, filled with a sense of loss, projecting sometimes where we are onto those things. And yet, we must have a mind like winter. We must be able to see this contrast between giving too much to understanding through our own lens to seeing things just as they are. Mary Oliver says, "How I go into the woods. Ordinarily I go to the woods alone, with not a single friend. for they are all smilers and talkers and therefore unsuitable. I don't really want to be witness talking to the catbirds or hugging the old black oak tree. I have my way of praying, as you no doubt have yours. Besides, when I am alone, I can become invisible. I can sit on the top of a dune, as motionless as an uprise of weeds, until the foxes run by unconcerned. I can hear the almost unhearable sound of the roses singing. If you have ever gone to the woods with me, I must love you very much. William Stafford said in his poem Witness, "This is the hand I dipped in the Missouri, above Council Bluffs and found the springs. All through the days of my life I escort this hand. Where would the Missouri meet a kinder friend? On top of Fort Rock, in the sun, I spread these fingers to hold the world in the wind. Along that cliff, in that old cave, where men used to live, I grubbed in the dirt for those cool springs again." I often wonder if learning to love is learning to be alone. When we find ourselves alone, we are encountering a quality of our experience that is more direct. And rather than needing something to be a certain way, or needing it to change, or projecting our own interior strife, or our own interior suffering on it to try to change us, we find ourselves available to the witness, to the observer, untouched, to be where things are. I think animals back in the indigenous times, I think why they made totems, I often wonder if they saw the animals as the gods because they had no judgment. They didn't have a memory. They just made their presence. And they behaved according to the relationship that they had with the world. And the interactions, it's so clean and clear that it's just pure response, pure engagement. They engage unto their own way of being made. They engage themselves by the way that they're made, in coordination with the related qualities with nature, the others in the space, and the qualities in the environments that they're in. If you've ever been scuba diving, I used to teach many, many years ago, and the way that you swim in the water will change the way that the life responds to you. Because you're there, you're a foreign object there, and if you're pushing the water, or you're not buoyant, or you're not neutrally buoyant, then you essentially give signals to the critters in that world that you're not supposed to be there. Unless you have some sensitivity to the way that you are moving in that world fluidly in a way that's harmonic. And so when you surface, you see so much more. It's like the backpacker would say, or the camper, if you pack lighter, you'll see so much more. If you pack less thought, if you pack less what you think it should be, if you pack less expectations, if you let go and let come, you will see the moment, and the moment will see you. And I would always wonder when divers would come back up and one or two would say, "Did you see that seahorse? Did you see this? Did you see that?" And they'd say, "No." And then I would just say to myself, I wonder how they were diving. How were they moving in that world? And how did they affect what they saw by their movement? You see, nature often plays the role of the significant other. I encountered this in a true story from New Zealand about a native called the Kanuka tree. She is a nursing mother tree. She comes first into traumatized forests. Those that are razed to the ground are destroyed by falling. And she plants herself as a pioneer and a watcher, and she waits for the seeds of the other natives to be dropped by birds flying over the barrenness. And as they germinate, she shelters them. One day they grow strong enough for her to yield and let them surpass her with their strength and longevity. In despair, a woman with an intergenerational mother wound without knowing she would answer, laid her head against her branches. And with such tender wisdom she took it all and showed me how to stand it, and how to yield, and how to bear the mother load, and how we do so for one another wholeheartedly. Such love in solid wood. See, the poet and the mystic know with deep-rooted knowing that there is such wisdom in tree and stone, the standing still and watching, tenderly supporting the human who can continue to lean in and learn, not leave but love, still now and still moving, walking with and forever yielding and holding the tension between given and giving, from and to the carver's hands. It's almost like we put space around things, and that it's our ability to do so, to allow that which there is to come alive, to interact, and to be whatever it needs to be as we hold space. Mary Oliver says in Toward the Space, we must begin to catch hold of everything around us, for nobody knows what we may need. We have to carry along the air, even, and the weight we once thought a burden turns out to form the pulse of our life and the compass of our brain. Colors balance our fears, and existence begins to clog unless our thoughts can occur unwatched and let a fountain of essential silliness out through our dreams. And I hope we can still arrange for the wind to blow and occasionally some kind of shock to occur, like rain, and stray adventures no one cares about, harmless love, immoderate guffaws on corners, families crawling around the front room growling, being bears in the piano cave. We are moved by forces we pretend to understand. We are moved by forces we pretend to understand. Half of it is what we create. The other part is how we take in life. Life is in the business of creating life. It is whole. It is a choral voice. And if all we're doing is just moving things around, then we've failed to become enlightened by what life has for us. I think one of the most powerful questions we can ask, if we just stand still, is what is the potential of this moment? Seriously, look into any domain right now where you're creating change or experiencing potential. You know there's something on the way in. You can see and sense there's something on the way out. It's a felt sense you have. But see what has potential in this moment. What is the potential of this moment? Or what is being offered you? What is being given to you? What if we make life our teacher? What if we don't add anything to it or need it to be any different, but we radically accept with trust and faith that that which is given to us is generous? Is that positive thinking? No. It doesn't mean that everything that we see we like, but we can meet it. We don't need to pathologize pain. We have the ability to witness it with unconditional observation, without adding anything to what it needs to be, but rather as it is. I think one of the most powerful poems that conveys this is the piece by William Stafford, Notice What the Poem Is Not Doing. Now, I'm going to read this very carefully and very slowly like I have the others, but I'm going to especially do it with this one because I think this really is the heart of the matter, and this really hits at why I wanted to give this talk. Notice what the poem is not doing. The light along the hills in the morning comes down slowly, naming the trees. White, then coasting the ground for stones to nominate. Notice what this poem is not doing. A house, a barn, the old quarry where the river shrugs. How much of this place is yours. Notice what this poem is not doing. Every person gone has taken a stone to hold and catch the sun. The carving says, not here, but called away. Notice what this poem is not doing. The sun, the earth, the sky, all wait. The crowns and redbirds talk. The light along the hills has come, has found you. Notice what this poem has not done. It hasn't ruined the beauty of what's being observed and how it is activating and animating the observer. And why it must be written? Because in a way, the right words, are listening. And they have found the awareness as an activation system through the poet, because that awareness is the sensing it of something in the organ of perception that is witnessing and yet not trying to make it into anything, but to allow it to be just as it is and appreciate with gratitude and generosity what can be said about it, but let the mountain explain itself. Notice what the poem is not doing. Stafford goes on to say in his poem, Just Thinking, he says, I got up on a cool morning. I leaned out a window. No cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot. Peace, you know. Let the bucket of memory down into the well. Bring it up. Cool, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. Let the bucket of memory down into the well. Bring it up. Cool, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. If I were to go into interpretations of these poems, I would miss the whole point of what I'm talking about. I'm not going to break down my evaluation of the poem because I want you to notice what I'm not doing is I'm making an effort not to bring my thoughts and interpretations to what I think you should see here, but rather I'm offering it to you. And in offering it to you, I'm calling on those resources, those discernments inside you, the curiosity, the compassion, the ability to see and perceive with your heart, and be able to hear something relevant that may be connecting with you in the present moment. Because it is just so, and it's just the right time, and there's just the right word, and then there's a world that lives in a sentence. And as you fiercely pay attention, as you show up to it, it offers you something. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window, no cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot. Peace, you know. Let the bucket of memory down into the well. Bring it up. Cool, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. And this is what the whole thing is about. It is about cultivating this quality in you, in your life, where you are able to live into the originality of your experience and see what's offered, what can be conserved through it. There's a savoring, there is a gladness, a joy, a contentment that can be reached. And it starts with the choice to be true, to teach yourself reality, to be fluent in reality. And it starts with a certain listening, leaning in until something changes you, offering that kind of generative listening, not listening out of your own will, but to allow yourself to be willed by it. Listen generatively. In this poem, Ask Me by Stafford, I think he asks us to, or more invites us to this place. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I've made. Ask me whether what I've done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. When we know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. What the river says, that is what I say. Voicing. We voice from a place that is beyond. Have you had moments where you've been in a group, maybe a collective experience, where something in you, an urge, a dynamic urge, surfaced a question, and it almost felt like something was speaking on behalf of itself, a larger whole, something that began moving into your words, how you said it, the place from which you attended when you said it, the moment without reluctance that you instantly said what you said, and someone else looked at you and said, I was thinking exactly that. And I'm really glad that you said it, because that's where my voice is going too. And you stand there and say, well, isn't that just something? How did that come in? So it's as if you were the mouthpiece and you spoke. And much like art, it was just made to be itself. I think it's expressed very well in this Stafford poem, You and Art. He says, your exact errors make a music that nobody hears. Your straying feet find the great dance walking alone. And you live on a world where stumbling always leads home. Year after year fits over your face. When there was youth, your talent was youth. Later, you find your way by touch where moss redeems the stone. And you discover where music begins before it makes any sound. Far in the mountains where canyons go, still as the always falling, ever new flakes of snow. Your exact errors make a music that nobody hears. Your straying feet find the great dance walking alone, and you live on a world where stumbling always leads home. Year after year fits over your face. When there was youth, your talent was youth. Later, you find your way by touch where moss redeems the stone, and you discover where music begins before it makes any sound. Far in the mountains where canyons go, still as the always falling, ever new flakes of snow. Nothing stays the same. Current reality is an acquired taste. We taste it, and then we taste it, and then we taste it, and then we taste it. And as we create, we come to the place where we taste it again. We taste what's relevant to what we want to create. It can take on disguises if we hide from it. We can aggress on it if it bothers us. And we get so cooked by our own emotions, we can make our own emotional suffering a point of reference. And then we release. And it's not about fixing ourselves. It's not deficiency-based. We show up as a whole person. We show up. Someone asked me recently, what is leadership? What is leadership? What is a leader? I've been doing this for 22 years. I've never been asked that question. And it's something that I am always circling around, but it's something that sits in the center that has never really been addressed. So I really thought about that question, and I thought, well, I can't answer what a leader is without answering leadership. And I can't answer leadership if we don't talk about the verb of leading. So I'd like to give it a try, and I'd like to ask you, what is a leader? How do you know if you distinguish yourself to be a leader? When you're leading, what are you doing? Leadership. A leader is someone who chooses to change or improve something, such that others that he or she influences want to do it by choice. Widely adopted with a questing disposition, leaders put to scale their vision as others contribute to its call to act. And act in such a way that once the vision comes to life, its remains stay in motion with lasting accomplishment and presence for years, maybe decades, perhaps centuries after its inception. The leader is a convening usher who invites others into change efforts by virtue of a noble reason, a purpose, doing it for the sake of it, even if it fails. They are open to the outcome, not attached. It is not what the leader's vision is, rather what it does, that makes working toward worthwhile. A leader is one who dies to cross the threshold from the current territory to the other. The original word leader is leith, L-E-I-T-H, which is a 2,000-year-old Indo-European word meaning to step across a threshold, to move from one world to the next. But on a deeper level, it meant to die, which is, what is it that's in me that needs to die to step from this world to the next world? To lead is to die back into reclaiming the wholeness, not by doing what is wanted only, but by turning to the call to lead and responding to what is needed. Therefore, leadership is the continuous access to the highest quality of expression that one can occupy at any moment. And for me, that is love. That at the very center of our organizations, when they're driven by great leaders, and they lead people into somewhere by choice to create an atmosphere of consent. They do it for themselves. They want to create it. They are citizens, not consumers. And therefore, more horsepower, more ingenuity, innovation, creativity, responsibility, organization comes from the collective because of this atmosphere of consent and trust. That there are latent resources in all of us that will not rise to the top unless we are together commonly carrying around something that we're causal about creating. And we feel the call, and we sense it, and we respond, and we move into it with partial information and figure out what needs to unfold. We lay the tracks down as the train moves. We understand the path by walking. That is faith in action, and that is the faith, the courage, the cœur, the core, the heart, in French, cœur, from the heart of the leader. Leadership is a continuous access to this heart, to truly care about something. And as we do, we choose to bring it into the world in such a way that we envision it. But yet when we finish our journey, not just the itinerary, what is turned into being, what comes into being, is that which it desires of itself through us. We let life take us by the hand because we show up as loving beings, creating out of the love that we are, generatively for the concern we have for the vision we want to create. And in that we embody and espouse that which the vision does to us, because we truly become who we are meant to be becoming, with a sense of purpose. Not with an existential question, but with the dynamic urge to create it for the sake of creating it. Because we love it, we choose it and create it. Be, do, have. The quality of action is emergent from this connection to a future self, something that hasn't come alive in us yet, but that is seeking us to come into being. And we can connect with that sacred project, but we do it by showing up as a higher quality of expression to all things in that quality of awareness and expression that moves something through us into being what it needs to be. We step aside. We surrender with our will into the willingness, and we combine our will and willingness into one of being moved and inspired in spirit, as well as compelling out of that a vision of something that must come. We can't not do it. And we must do it because we know that it's right. It's not whether it's succeeding, whether it will work. We don't know. But we do it on behalf of it because we care. And that itself is enough. That's really all it is anyway. We're all making this up as we go along. There are no experts. So giving our humanity to that which we really care about is probably where we access our home in our best selves. And yet we forget to walk in this place with our best self. And it's looking for us, It's knocking. It's knocking. And then we turn toward it and we hear the whisper in our hearts of what we really want. And yet we experience fear and shame and judgment, these inner enemies. And then we set them aside and we say, hey, why don't you take a place in the bleachers? I'm going to look past you and choose the path of what we desire of the stars, desire of the King. And we hold a wise innocence, something in the parenthesis we do not know. We cannot know. It's as if we're walking with one eye. And that one eye is a great Zen story. A young but earnest Zen student approached his teacher and asked the Zen master, "If I work very hard and diligent, how long will it take for me to find Zen?" The master thought about this and then replied, 10 years. And the student then said, "But what if I work very, very hard and really apply myself to learn fast? How long then?" Replied the master, "Well, 20 years. "But if I really, really work hard at it, how long then?" asked the student. 30 years, replied the master. "But I do not understand," said the disappointed student. "At each time that I say I will work harder, you say it will take me longer. Why do you say that?" Replied the master. "When you have one eye on the goal, you only have one eye on the path." The path is the goal just as much as the goal. The journey is its own reward. The process of creating it is its own reward. The learning of being enriched, involved, seeking something to be revealed will grow you in such a way that you do not determine the way of it. You can't. But to be involved in life, to be involved in the process of bringing it into being. When a mother makes the baby, sure, she suffers, but that involvement of creating that little being into the world is the miracle. Yes, it's there. And so we trust it. We trust it. And that as we trust it, we bring that faith, that deep-rooted faith, in action. I wrote this piece called Faith to describe my sense of what that is. I walk on air with nothing to rely on. Only one way is forward, just one. All I can do is just go. Perhaps it's the way I forget the worst, or maybe it's not to figure out. I remain hollow like a flute. Open air can move through me, and the sound is made into whatever form it can be. Someone once told me about me. I thought I knew too, and then I wrote this. And right now you're reading it. Stafford wrote Security. He said that tomorrow we'll have an island. Before night I will always find it. And then on to the next island. These places hidden in the day, separate, and come forward if you beckon. But you have to know they are there before they exist. Sometime there will be a tomorrow without an island. So far I haven't let that happen, but after I'm gone, others may become faithless and careless. And before them, will tumble the wide unbroken sea, and without any hope they will stare at the horizon. So to you, friend, I confide my secret. To be a discoverer, you hold close whatever you find. And after a while you decide what it is. Then, secure in where you have been, you turn to the open sea and let go. To turn to the open sea and let go. You start. And you find that unforeseen forces come to your aid. Much like jump and the net will find you. That you're held in a way by a sanctuary, something that holds you, an invisible hand that is guiding. And to walk like that, it's to hold yourself up by the walking that you do. When I was a little boy and I was 13, I encountered this kind of energy through music and going through some deep emotional pain from some family issues. Families break up, they become dysfunctional, there's all sorts of rifts and pain. The music found me, and the ambient music, these synth pads and beautiful drones and electronic music was my way to find a refuge in a natural way. And so it was essential for me to discover that world and to create worlds from that, almost like a root. And so years later now, as I've enjoyed this companionship all my life in the ambient spaces, I have these musical companions that are with me in different areas of my life, my work area, my home area, my environments, where I combine these with soft sound. And I live in soft sound. And it goes like this: floating whispers, structures from silence, and the stars go with you. Shadows lengthen tall and wide, casting nets of divination. Soak it all in and keep moving into gentle stillness until nothing else says stop except the space. Let it capture you in its rapture. Let it outpace you and undo you from tomorrow. Only this is essential. Now here in the timeless spiral, listen without listening, feel without feeling, be without being. Just this: wordless, pureness, effortless, quietness, Chi, Ram. It's to give myself to it, to let the music explain itself, and to let it have its way. It's about holding power in a different way. It's about showing up. Yeah, it's about paying attention fiercely. It's about telling yourself the truth and being open to the outcome, but not attached. It's about movement. It's about being moved. And these things, these qualities, are what coming home is about, is coming home in the freshness of your mind to look freshly at things again, and the renewal of that, and the regeneration of the heart, to release our preoccupations with shame and our concepts of ourselves, and rather not be at issue with those, to let those be there, but yet focus our attention more on the nature of our compassion, and to find in the wounds that have been caused us the opportunities to heal, to be able to sit with others and hold the space with legitimacy, without needs for dominance and submission, or being better or competitive, or defining ourselves with individuation against. Those things just lead to isolation and loneliness. But to find our way into connection, and to restore our hearts, to reclaim our hearts, our armored hearts. Yeah. And that isn't a process that comes necessarily easy, or it's not a step-by-step. It's a slow, gradual awakening for some and very quickly for others. If you're like me, if you're thinking the universe or wondering if it's a friendly place, that's an incredible question. Is it? And if you knew that it was, because you knew more of the goodness in you and the gold within you, what would you do? How would you orient yourself in the moment? What would be your quality of expression as a leader if you oriented yourself in that? And the courage to be true, to be authentic, to choose things that matter to you, and organize your life around just that. So I'd like to close the presentation with a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver called Last Night the Rain Spoke to Me. And I think this captures a lot of the points that we've made about coming home to your heart, coming home to yourself, coming home. It's such an incredible thing to think about, letting the mountain explain itself. That it really is about a homecoming in every way. Internally, it's about renewing our sense of goodness and reminding ourselves of all that we've been given that is important to give. Yeah. And that as we remind ourselves, it is about it's about this Hiraeth. And that the Hiraeth is that longing, that place to come back to what's true, and to the pure potentiality, the pure possibilities of what is waiting for you. Everything is waiting for you. So here's Mary Oliver's poem, Last Night the Rain Spoke to Me. Last night the rain spoke to me, slowly, saying what joy to come falling out of the brisk cloud, to be happy again in a new way on the earth. That's what it said as it dropped, smelling of iron, and vanished like a dream of the ocean into the branches and the grass below. And then it was over. The sky cleared. I was standing under a tree. The tree was a tree with happy leaves, and I was myself, and there were stars in the sky that were also themselves at the moment, at which moment my right hand was holding my left hand, which was holding the tree, which was filled with stars in the soft rain. Imagine the long and wondrous journeys still to be ours.